We're very excited to have here with us Jessica Wamala from PromisePay.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I know I have a few other colleagues from Promise on the line as well. We really felt it was important for Promise to participate in the work that MIT is doing today. And so who is Promise? We really work directly with government to bring and provide a solution to people when it comes to accessing public services. And so what matters at our core is we are a financial technology company. And so what that means is we are building simple, fair, and flexible payment tools. And these tools allow us to not only maximize revenue for utility companies and governments, but we also reduce the negative consequences of debt for those who need it the most. We really are here to provide a solution to not only bring revenue to a lot of these jurisdictions that you see here, but also to lift the people up. And so our theory of change is actually really simple. We know that people want to pay. People have it actually in their hearts. They want to pay, but we just need to give them a good choice. And so when you give people good choices, the overwhelming majority will pay. And so what we've seen is there's actually a hard time getting access to the program. So a lot of people who are in arrears don't actually know these programs exist that are there to help them. Interest-free payment plans or payment plans that will really break up the total amount that they owe. The application process is very laborious. You might have to go to the water company yourself. There might not even be an online application. If there is an online application, it can oftentimes be arduous with many steps. But what happens when people enter the programs? We've seen in traditional payment plans a historically high failure rate. And what that means is once people are on these payment plans, they're not actually paying. They either get kicked out or the company, like the utility company, isn't actually able to recoup the revenue that they might have expected. We really have a different approach to payment plans. The first is going to be outreach. So we need, as Promise, as a technology company, to be able to get the payment plan in front of the people who need it the most. The next best practice I want to highlight is convenience. People who are able to get through the process really easily and sign up on their own terms and schedules are going to be most effective in the program itself. The third best practice I want to highlight is really that flexibility. These affordable and flexible options really help people stay adherent to the payment plan. And lastly, I want to highlight is service. Our customer service here at PromisePay really is engaged at humanizing the relationship with our customers. So here is an example, a little simple flowchart of what happens in traditional payment plans versus PromisePay when there's a late payment. So you'll see on the top of the flow, most payment plans, you'll get kind of kicked out of the payment plan right away after a late payment. And so someone, when they immediately are supposed to get charged their scheduled payment, but it doesn't go through, they get a text message. We then have an escalating series of text messages that go on for actually 30 days if you don't have a new payment after any of these text messages. 40% of customers who receive this text message actually get back on track to make that payment within 24 hours. This means that the next month they will also be more likely to pay, and the next month and the next month after that. And so you can see here, over $3 million would have been lost versus the bottom graph, which shows Promise's escalating series of warnings. So we make it very clear to someone, here's a good option. And actually 70% of people who see this page end up taking us up on the paying of $25. We are a payment plan provider for people's past due arrearages. And so we've needed to think very creatively on Promise in terms of being able to encourage those payments while also supporting someone to stay on the payment plan. Really, the reason why Promise has been so successful is we're allowing utility providers to really reach your budget goals while reducing these consequences for those who make payments. So 90% of customers are able to successfully keep on track. And again, the engagement that we have with customers leads to more revenue for you all. When they're recurring customers with us, that means they're going to also have that positive interaction with your utility company as well.
What is the business model, I suppose, is the question behind PromisePay.
So the utility is like our main sort of customer, right? The utility company is contracting Promise's services as a software solution. The goal here being that everybody wins. Promise is able to make some money So like from the implementation fee, but also from the success fee or the transaction fee. And then your utility company is also able to recoup a lot more revenue given our success rate in our payment. So it depends on what your sort of city looks like in terms of how you engage in new third-party contracts. But the implementation process is one that is very, very hands-on, and we are very much in conversation with the utility company. It's more of a here are our best practices and what are the ways in which we can meet your needs.
Is there anything different about water versus other utilities in terms of your model?
We are in power. We're also in criminal justice. We're also in, we're trying to expand to tolling and parking. And so I think the theory of change is still the same. These are people who are oftentimes in debt because of various circumstances, but there are people who want to pay and they want to get themselves out of debt. And they're critical resources, they're critical public services that they need access to. And so we're providing a payment solution that is fair and flexible. And so that model is very much the same. I really think the top reasons here I want to highlight are our flexibility, the smaller payments, and our communication. In as simple terms as possible, like what can affirm their ability to pay and when they can pay.
It's been very easy to use, and it's helped ease my mind.
Promise was really great in helping us to be able to do that outreach to those customers, to let them know that they could get some assistance. They could go on to a micro payment plan and be able to pay down their debt with us. Yeah, there's no way we could, ever turn it off at this point. Customers really need it.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Jess.
Thank you so much to everyone on the MIT staff for including Promise Pay in this very, very rich discussion about affordability and flexibility, because it's definitely the conversation we need right now.
I'm a lawyer by training, and much of my scholarship involves human rights, and particularly the domestic application of human rights law to protect economic, social, and cultural rights. I first got involved in working on water specifically back in 2013. I was part of a group that filed a human rights amicus brief in the litigation challenging water shutoffs in Detroit. In each of these projects, one thing that was very striking, and we've heard about it already today, is how difficult it is to get information about both water utility policies and then the policies implementation. And it was striking because, of course, you would expect that the policies would be readily available to water customers. And you might also expect that water utilities would want to gather implementation data to see whether their policies were effective. And some do prioritize that, of course, but there are over 148,000 water systems operating in the US, so it's impossible to offer a definitive statement that covers all of them. The scale and location of the affordability challenge is poorly understood because data are not widely available, as well as being subjective and not standardized. But this is a problem not only for researchers, but also for advocates and activists and consumers themselves. The NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, Inc., for example, has filed suit in Cleveland to challenge racial bias and shutoffs. But to get the data to support that suit, they had to submit multiple rounds of Freedom of Information Law requests just to get to the point of being able to file an initial complaint that might then have the potential to require production of more definitive data. And one reason it's hard to know whether issues are truly systemic is that most water utilities, as we've heard, do not have a practice of maintaining data that might illuminate the impacts of their policies. The lack of data allows bias to fly under the radar. And as we've discussed today as well, there are many places where bias can enter the system in negotiating payment plans, making decisions about shutoffs. We've heard an increasing number of local water utilities are offering modest discounts on water and sanitation bills in response to rising costs. These vary across the country. The discounts are most often offered only to senior citizens who are on a fixed income. Utilities often report that their discount programs are underutilized, as we heard today too. But at the same time, discounts are often poorly advertised. And further, only a handful of cities around the country, as far as I know, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Austin, Texas, and maybe a couple of others provide assistance to unmetered renters whose landlords may be passing on rising costs to their tenants. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with discount programs. They're certainly better than nothing. But surely utilities themselves should have some mechanism other than lawsuits to affirmatively ensure that their policies are being administered fairly and without racial bias. So the idea should be to try to address bias before the fact, before it has an impact on policy implementation. So what are some of the forward-thinking approaches to this? There's a move nationwide to put some affirmative obligations on water utilities to collect and share data about shutoffs and to improve their data management capabilities more generally. There are a few state laws that are pushing the effort along in the water sector. In California, a 2019 law requires that public water utilities report on numbers of shutoffs. Illinois, in 2021, Illinois passed a law mandating annual and monthly reporting on investor-owned gas, electric, water, and sewer utilities. A number of states, including Michigan and Massachusetts, require this kind of reporting for gas and electric. But Illinois may be unique in requiring this also for water and sewer. The annual reports must be submitted beginning this month, May 2022, and every month going forward. There are 2 annual data points that Illinois law collects: the number of disconnections for non-payment and the number of reconnections. Now, the Illinois law applies only to investor-owned water utilities, which serve 8% of water customers in Illinois. But this is a big advance in terms of the transparency of these utilities' operations. One approach that we've been looking at in Massachusetts to try to address public utility reporting is something that was introduced as part of our state budget. And the idea is a competitive grant program that would support local water utilities in piloting equity audits of their systems. So this equity audit approach, we can't be sure it will be effective. It's not a mandate. It does provide financial support, so that's an important component. It's not an unfunded mandate. It's instead an incentive program. I hope I've convinced folks on the call that it's time to shift some of the burden to the government to improve the transparency and equity of their operations, and that you'll be interested in thinking about ways that more sunshine on water utility operations can promote racial justice in the water sector. Was there?
Everything we've been talking about is we need more data, especially about the people most in need, so that we could direct policies, programs, and practices. What about the downside of that whole data collection, privacy invasion concern?
I'm sure it's not an insurmountable problem. I guess that's what I would say. That we've got examples. I mentioned renters. I've been looking a lot at the cities that provide access to benefits to renters. They use existing data, and so far as I know, there haven't been breaches or concerns or exploitation or anything like that. So I wouldn't want the fear of some kind of privacy breach to keep people from getting help that they need for a need that's absolutely critical. So I think that the goal has to be to create some kind of program that's going to be helpful to people while maintaining the privacy to the extent that is necessary.
It's only as good as the training and what you put in place, but nothing's absolutely safe. There's going to be data breaches, there are going to be errors, and the best thing you could do is contain, inform, and correct.
Do we know very much about what the incentives were for cities that were not San Francisco, perhaps to engage in the gender audit? Do we have research on that?
So in the cities that did these gender equity audits, there was some political will. The city council adopted a resolution saying we are going to conform to CEDAW, made some funds available. There were people in the community that wanted to take a next step.
Please come back at 3:20, and when we will hear from Susan Crosby from the city of Philadelphia. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about our journey from assistance to affordability. Our flagship program is the tiered assistance program. You really can't talk about affordability without equity. And so I want to talk about Philadelphia's commitment to racial equity as well. The City of Philadelphia has the Philadelphia Water Department and the Department of Revenue. The Water Department handles water from river to meter, and then the Revenue Department handles it from meter to cash. So in my position, I handle the billing and collections in addition to the administration of the assistance program. So that's kind of the lens and the way that I look at things. We worked very closely with the Utility Emergency Services Fund. We provide grants for their operation, and we also provide matching grants. So they get housing stabilization dollars from many different funding sources. They give a customer a grant and we match that grant. When we first started, we had it available in paper in 10 languages, English, Spanish, Italian, Chinese, both simplified and traditional, Portuguese, Vietnamese, Arabic, Russian, and Cambodian. We chose these languages by working with the city's Office of Immigrant Affairs, and we chose the top 10 languages that were accessed and used in Philadelphia. So our CSRs have the ability to look at all the programs that the customer qualifies for, and the system automatically picks the one that is best for them, and then the service rep approves it or denies it. But you can see from this that we have a lot of information on this change, on this income program selection. You have the account balance and the household size, whether or not there's a landlord, whether they're a senior, and it shows you that your TAP bill is going to be cheaper than your regular bill, even with a standard payment agreement. So the benefits of TAP is that the past due amounts are suspended and they're not enforced upon while the customers are successfully enrolled in the program. And this is important because unlike our prior WRAP program, this prevents the debt from increasing. So this is the thing that everyone wants to know. What does it cost? So we have the expenses and the discount, and the expenses are wages, benefits of the staff, IT support, and overhead. We have a staff of 20 who work on reviewing these applications, and supervisors and clerical staff. We have their wages, their benefits, their pensions, their fringes. We have the IT support for our third-party vendors. And then we have the overhead. We have building costs. And so for our first year, which was fiscal year 18, because we launched July 1, 17, the expenses were $7.3 million. We've updated the application because we heard from our partners that people were struggling to complete this application. We have a really robust partnership with Community Legal Services, UESF that we mentioned. We have energy community associations that we deal with. So we recently went through a redesign of the application to make it a little clearer about what we were asking. We're also getting into a data sharing agreement with the city. We have a database called the CARES database, and we are accessing information of people who received certain city services and benefits over the past year, and they will be exempted from disconnection as well. We have a new cost recovery mechanism, a rider that the rate board approved in September of 2019. Now, it doesn't recover all of the discount. It recovers a portion of it. And the big thing that we're excited about is in the processing is this streamlined auto enrollment with the LIWAP customers. If that works, it kind of opens up a whole new different ways of enrolling. It's a possibility for LIHEAP. It's a possibility for other state benefits or other programs. I want to talk a little bit about racial equity, and it just kind of takes us through the design of welfare programs that was racist and punitive. And it was really stacked against Black people and Black women, really. It takes a lot for a utility to get out of that protect against fraud, revenue protection mindset to shift from assistance to affordability to equity. It really is a journey, and Philadelphia is further ahead, but we still have a long way to go. But in Philadelphia, we have a strong commitment to racial equity. In January of 20, Mayor Kenny signed an executive order requiring each city department to work with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to complete a racial equity assessment and a racial equity action plan. So our rates have increased, but not substantially as to drive the number of customers who would need assistance up. The problem that we have faced, and I think everyone who has a low-income program, is subscription. We know that we don't have as many people who are eligible on our program. In the TAP program, we do not charge late penalties, and it's a rate. So we don't, by not paying your bill, you're not kicked out of the rate. However, if you don't recertify on the program when we ask you to, we will remove you from the rate. And at that point, you'll go back to your standard bill amount, your standard accrual of penalties and things like that.
There is a huge problem of getting data in each city and to do comparative studies across each city about who exactly is hurt in which ways by this gap between what people can afford to pay and what things cost to provide. And we're all doing this research year in and year out and constantly saying, and we don't have the data that we need, and we don't have a way to get the data that we need. And it's not that somebody's holding it back. It isn't collected in a way that can be pooled readily by all the different people doing this work. So we do our work as best we can, but boy, would we like there to be a commitment. And what commitment's going to take on the utility side, on the governmental side, city level, state level, advocacy groups, environmental justice groups, it's going to take a shared commitment. And can we say something collectively about how important it is that continuous federal funding and state partnership be restored so that the gap that we're working on doesn't keep growing because of operational and capital cost to places.
If you could put in the chat your thoughts about that, what stands out to you, what excites you or worries you, and what do you want to make sure we talk about tomorrow? And we'll make sure to bring up these points tomorrow as we work towards what are our collective next steps, what are things that we can agree upon. And we're really looking forward to further discussion tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us today.